be so sad if they died, but they never understand how bad it is. And I'm only 24, and it's already been half of my life that I've dealt with it. And I can't deal with it anymore.
A dramatic 911 call moments before a beautiful young woman struggling with depression killed herself. Thanks for joining us as we continue our 12 News special, Armed in Arizona. We now focus our program on discussions on mental health issues, which is as big, if not the biggest part of this debate. The 911 call that you just heard came from a story that we aired a few weeks ago about a young woman. You see her here, Christy Stadler. She was plagued with mental illness. She checked into a hospital for treatment, but when released was given back her gun and ultimately ended her own life. Joining us tonight in studio is Christy's dad, Terry Stadler, Chad Campbell, the House Minority Leader, who's introduced a bill to close the loophole that put the gun back in Christy's hand. We also have Dr. Sheree Ghani, the Chief Medical Officer for Magellan Health Services of Arizona, and Chip Coffey, the Director of Therapy Services for St. Luke's Behavioral Health in Phoenix. Guys, we talk about social responsibility, and that is one component, I think, of this gun mess. But mental illness is another, and it seems counterintuitive to me to put a gun in someone's hand who's mentally ill. Would we all agree on that?
Yes.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
And yet, until this legislation was put in place by you, it happened time and time again in Phoenix.
Well, until it's been offered by me. My bill hasn't got a hearing yet. It's been double assigned. And I think probably the most disturbing thing to me during this first session after these incidents is that for all the talk about mental health from my Republican counterparts in the House after the tragedy in Connecticut, for instance, they haven't introduced a single bill to actually address the mental health issues in this state.
And Terry, we were talking about your situation earlier, featured on a story that we ran on 12 News, which prompted Chad Campbell to put that into his legislation.
Yes.
You would still have your daughter had the police not given her gun back, even though they knew that she had checked herself in for a previous suicide attempt.
Yes, I believe so. Christy was sick that night, even after she picked the gun up, and was successfully talked down after you just heard that opening segment, how desperate she was. You can hear the pain in her voice from the depression. And the suicide counselor managed to get her to a safe place, and she was ready to go into the house. But the DPS intervened and chased her down the street into a corner. But the whole thing starts with Phoenix Police Department knowing that she was seriously mentally ill, returning that gun and bullets to her 15 hours before.
The tricky part becomes, how do you red flag someone who could have mental issues without trampling on their civil rights?
Mark, I completely agree with you, and I would like to take this opportunity to talk about a couple of initiatives real quick in Phoenix, Arizona. The crisis services, state-of-the-art crisis services, and are available 24/7. The young lady used one of those crisis services that night, unfortunate ending, but the services are available through 602-222-9444. Secondly, mental health first aid. That is a national effort. It's a public health approach to help the public learn how to identify and then engage in individuals who may be suffering from a mental health crisis, from a panic attack, or someone contemplating suicide, or anyone else having a psychiatric reaction.
Chip, is it easier said than done to identify someone with a mental illness who could become either suicidal or homicidal?
Well, it's really difficult, and that's one of the things that we face, is that we use the term mental illness, but what we're not looking at is that there's 1 in 4 people in the United States who has a diagnosable mental illness. So we're not wanting to capture those people with anxiety or depression. What we're looking at is that there's people with schizophrenia, paranoia, where that's where we tend to get the violence. But again, the level of violence with people with mental illness is far lower than in any other segment. The unfortunate part, as you experienced, is that what we see is people with mental illness are much more of a threat to themselves than to other people.
So real quickly, moving forward, how heavy a lift is this going to be to take care of our mentally ill, but at the same time allow gun ownership to continue in America?
Well, I think we have to accomplish it, and I think for the language that I looked at, we talked about anybody that's been deemed as a threat to themselves or somebody else they have to forfeit their weapon until they've been cleared by their healthcare provider. It's not anybody suffering from any mental illness. I think we need to use some common sense here, and we need to put aside the partisan rhetoric that we've seen over the past couple of years on this issue and really focus on solutions. Nothing is perfect, but we need to do everything we can to try to make these circumstances better.
Because something is better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing, and right now, nothing is being done.
It's an important discussion and an issue that obviously will continue. Guys, thanks for coming down. And I think I speak for all of us when we say we're sorry for your loss.
Well, thanks, Mark.
All right, Terry Stabilization.